Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jordan here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this multiplayer ladder battle, I will be piloting the Empire, led by a general of the Empire. Not so exciting, not Karl Franz, but hey, it's still cool, and hey, they can carry potions, so what's to complain? As far as my front line goes, I have two groups of swordsmen. Again, these units are shielded, and I feel like they're pretty good core infantry against the Dwarves. They're cheap, and I had some expendable resources, so that was my choice. And again, the Dwarves don't bring a lot of large units, so if any. So these swordsmen are going to be quite good against them. I have a backline of great swords. Again, these units are armor-piercing anti-infantry, and the Dwarves bring almost exclusively infantry. So they're pretty good against the Dwarves for sure. And then behind them, I have a group of Demogryph Knights, just standard Demogryph Knights. I decided not to get Halberd. Again, these are anti-infantry, armored, shielded, armor-piercing, so they're going to be quite good against the Dwarves as well. And then I also have handgunners back here, so they have the armor-piercing as well. You guys can see a recurring theme in this army. And again, I really like them because the Dwarves aren't that mobile of a faction, unless they're really aggressive with their slayers. So handgunners can usually maneuver around the battle and get really optimal positioning against the Dwarves and can just tee off on flanks and different things like that. And then the front line, I have two great cannons. As far as my leadership goes, I have an Amber Wizard, or Davy Crockett, as I like to call him. He is very, very cool. He'll summon a Manticore, which is very good at harassing Dwarves. And then a General of the Empire with his potions, and an Empire Captain who is also rocking the potions. So very fun. As far as my opponent's army composition goes, he has a front line of Dwarf Warriors. So again, these are very fairly weak infantry, in my opinion. I don't really like them. I think it's worth getting Longbeards. They only cost a few hundred more, and they're just so much better in my opinion. He has a Thane, a melee specialist, who is rocking the potions, of course. He has Hammers, two groups of Thunders, a group of Slayers, which will be pretty good against my Demogryph Knights if used correctly. Another group of Hammers, another group of Slayers, some Dwarf Warriors in the rear flank and auxiliary, and then he has two cannons as well. So we have pretty equivocal siege units. So without further ado, let's get started. So again, I couldn't see him right now. I was obscured by the fog of war, line of sight, whatever you want to call it. So I sent up these Demogryph Knights, and I just wanted to get a feel for the map and see if there's any funny business, if there's some weird gyrocopter stuff going on, whatever. And I also summon a Manticore immediately. They're very, very good for scouting. So if you're in a situation where you think you may need to scout due to the map, Manticores, or Amber Wizards for that matter, I would highly suggest getting. I think they're very, very cool and great at diving Dwarvish artillery as well. So I believe just now I get sight on him. I'm able to get that line of sight right over the lip with these Demogryph Knights. So if I'm not mistaken, I saw him. I can't quite recall, but it looks like my opponent, he wisely... You don't want to march over here, because then if your opponent just simply marches straight ahead, he'll have this massive high ground advantage on you, which is definitely not fun to be in. So he wisely marches over here, which will put him on a relatively level battlefield with me. So that was definitely well played on his part. So we'll go ahead and fast forward, because again, a lot of this is just armies marching, and there's a lot of idle time in a lot of these games. So I immediately see where he is, and I move my units to essentially line up with his, and I get my cannons starting to take shots right away. So they're shooting into his ranks, and I like to target the Thunderers, because if you target the Thunderers throughout the battle, they'll usually stay and shoot in the back, so they're available targets the entire time. But before the battle starts, I sometimes work down the enemy infantry line, and I think I was aiming for these Hammers, because those are an expensive unit and a very cost-effective target for those cannons. But I alternate between the Thunderers and the Hammers as well. I don't like to shoot the enemy cannons usually. It depends on the type of artillery I have, but it's just they're a very small target, and I feel like you get more bang for your buck from shooting at these guys. Though that shot did just miss, I still feel it's quite of a worthwhile investment. So his cannons are now returning fire, and he's taken some nice shots at my swordsman over here, but again, not a lot of damage sustained yet. And I do have this Manticore over here, which is so good in this situation, because if he doesn't pull his Thunderers back, I can fly over, I can dive bomb them, I can pull out. So what that does for me is that opens up the front. So now my handgunners can just line up right here and start shooting at these Dwarf Warriors. Then if he comes back to deal with them with his Thunderers, I pull in the Manticore. It's a very vicious cycle, and it's definitely very hard to deal with for these type of factions. So again, my handgunners are going to come up here, and I'm advancing my army just a little bit closer. And thankfully I was able to I didn't have to leave any protection here against a lot of factions like Empire, Vampire Counts, Greenskins, pretty much every other faction. You usually have to leave some protection by your cannons, or at least be aware of that, but against Dwarves, you don't really need to at all. You can kind of just advance, in conjunction with whatever strategy you're working at that moment. So again, my cannons are doing quite a bit of damage. You can see that several groups of his units are taking a bit of damage, and it's starting to wear down on him. And you can tell, I think he might have been getting a little frustrated with these Thunderers. But regardless, I do see that he's reforming them in the front, so I have to be a little careful with these handgunners and make sure not to get too close. But now, I'm able to just start taking pot shots at this western flank here with these Dwarf Warriors. So I was very happy about that. That was working out quite well for me. And this group of handgunners, unfortunately, did take a bit of cannon damage. So he did quite a good job targeting those guys down. But they still do get some nice shots here. And you can see these Dwarf Warriors are taking a serious beating, as well as this unit over here. So his outer flanks are going to be very weak when this engagement starts. So I pull back these handgunners, realizing they're taking way too much fire. And I keep this group fighting as well. And at this point, I also land this Manticore back here. And he does a decent amount of damage to these cannons, if I'm not mistaken. He might have done a little bit over here. And then I just run him straight through. So he just basically did a lap. And at this point, it's just going to fly. They're so good at dive bombing those things, which is great. And it occupied all these units. It disrupted his formation a little bit. But, you know, very good on him. He kept these Thunders in position and, you know, kept that guy at bay. Because, again, I was going to cast some good magic on him there. But, again, these handgunners have just been teeing off unopposed for a minute. So he finally pulls these guys up, which is definitely a good play here. And I believe my cannons are still just shooting in on these poor Dwarf Warriors. So it's definitely going rough for him. And again, I'm just kind of repositioning these guys every few seconds, scooting them back. And this unit is basically just destroyed. They've taken so much damage. And I also use a magic missile on those Thunders and do pretty good damage. It cuts right through the middle of them and does pretty good work. And again, I believe I use Flock of Doom back here. It was a little poorly cast. I think I meant to click on this group of Thunders, but regardless, it's still, you know, taking them down, and, you know, it wasn't an absolutely awful investment. So at this point, I notice he's advancing his front line, which is exactly what I want. I want him to have to overextend his army. Again, he seemed to have more of a turtle type composition. So I push these guys out here, so they'll be able to shoot in once I engage here. And then this group of handgunners I pull out over here, and I'm going to get a nice angle on this this western flank of mine here. And again, the Manticore is still just trolling about. I actually pull it in here, if I'm not mistaken, and target these Thunders, which was because it's much faster than these dwarf units. He probably should have pulled these Slayers to chase it, but again, this guy's just going to get some nice free kills on these guys, and Manticores just are great units. He does turn around his Thunders and get a full firing volley on him, which is going to do a bit of damage. So that was good on him, but those things aren't shooting my front line. It's just they're both tied up, both of those Thunders with the Manticore. So I engaged my longswords or greatswords over here, and they're going to absolutely annihilate these Dwarvish warriors. It's just a far superior unit, and they're going to have a bad time. So I'm engaging there. And then, of course, I have my Thunderers here, or Handgunners, excuse me, shooting these hammers, doing pretty good. And in the back line, I engage with the Demogryph Knights, who have been taking a lot of cannon fire this whole game. But regardless, these hammers and Dwarf Warriors are having a really bad time. And I get a nice Flock of Doom here on these frontline units, which will do a little chunk of damage and definitely pay itself off. So he engages his Thane in the front line with my greatswords, and I put my General of the Empire. It'll be a pretty even matchup there. I do have potions, and he does as well, so it'll probably just be more of a stalemate / attrition fight. My Manticore finally does get chased off, but not before doing quite a bit of damage and breaking those Thunders. And this other group also was occupied with them for a long time while this main battle developed, so that was good. And of course, he was occupied with all these infantry, so unfortunately, I accidentally pat these handgunners forward, and I realized that it might have been too late to save them, so I just start shooting at these guys, and I get a nice volley there. And I believe I try and retreat them here, and I also pull forward the troops who just broke this line to deal with them, and that actually worked out quite well, but unfortunately these Slayers are just going to keep pushing through, and I believe they do eventually catch those guys. And the Manticore came back, thankfully, so you see he's just pathing them around, trying to get to my handgunners, which is very smart. Over here, these handgunners were shooting up the hill, and he did use the Slayers to chase them down, so finally those handgunners are going to meet their end. I don't have enough troops on auxiliary to really help them out. I believe I send these greatswords down, who just finished off these Dwarf Warriors, but I did have them in guard mode, so they wouldn't overextend. Over here, my Amber Wizard he's just been casting spells and Weissen's Wild Form and different things throughout the battle. And I'm finally able to catch up to these Slayers with these longswords. And though these handgunners are broken, these greatswords are going to make short work of these Slayers. I still have a full healthy unit. And look at that, Manticore actually came back and is able to chase down routing Dwarf units. So that's been very nice as well. Over here, I believe I cast a Flock of Doom, is it? It's something like that. Oh, no, I cast Weissen's Wild Form in these greatswords because they were one of the few units that was still fighting in the front line, so I wanted to really just send the message and, you know, drive it home and end this battle. I also saw his Thunderers here finally starting to get online, so I decided to push my Empire Captain through. And again, he's still rocking his potions, and it's just healthy and strong, and he's able to just get rid of these guys and chase them off the battlefield, which is nice. And that freaking Manticore is just such a beast. It just was able to survive all that gunfire. It's still taking gunfire, and it was able to come back and disrupt those cannons for a little bit longer, which was really nice. So I can't complain. So as far as the front line goes, I was able to win pretty handily. I think that was largely due in part to the fact that most of his units were severely damaged in the beginning from cannon and handgunner fire. He had, like, his hammers were very destroyed. He had 2 units of Dwarf Warriors that were just absolutely demolished. So here I still have this Empire Captain who finally used his Potion of Healing because he is surrounded by Slayers who will do a lot of damage to him, but thankfully he's supported by some great swords, so that should go in my favor. And again, most of his units are broken or routing here, and things are going quite well for me. Right now I do pull this General of the Empire to deal with these cannons now that his front line is broken. So a few great swords here, just fighting off his Lord and whatever else is left. And I think he has a single Slayer. These guys are just such champs. You gotta love Slayers. Such cool units. So they're fighting, going fisticuffs back here. Definitely cool. And my cannons are in good shape. These handgunners did come back from break, so I believe I pulled them forward. And also the Davy Crockett over here was chasing down some routing dwarf units. So this is kind of the end of it. I mean, for the most part, he has some Slayers left, and a few guys here and there. And the Slayers will prolong the battle, but again, it was over at this point. So definitely, the handgunners were really, really strong in that game. And again, the cannons, I had a little bit of a high ground advantage here on that lip, so that was quite helpful as well. But again, a lot of it was the handgunners, and you use that Manticore to draw the missile fire, and then you advance with your own missiles, get optimal positioning, retreat the Manticore. When he comes to deal with that, you fly it back in. It's such a good strategy with Davy Crockett, so definitely a big fan of that. As far as the units go, the greatswords, did so good. And, again, the swordsmen did pretty well for themselves, and the handgunners also were just invaluable. This one group did take a lot of damage from the cannon and thunderer fire, but the other one did really good. Cannons also racked up 90, 60 kills, so really can't complain there. Though he did do a really good job taking out my Demogryph Knights. They did basically eliminate a group of hammers, but they were taken down shortly after that. So again, good game to the Narc. I believe this is the second game in a row I played this guy. Definitely a good player, and I believe he took a few games off me as well later in the night. So really good game. I look forward to seeing you again on Ladder. And thank you all for watching. More content coming soon. Take care.